Hi, my name is Murray, and it's good to have you with us for another session of I Wonder, this little series I'm doing, which is looking at why people believe that the Christian faith is real and can be relied on. We've come a small way into the series. We looked at the universe and the constants of the universe. We've looked at life and the beginning of life. Today, I'd like to focus on the Bible. And the Bible for Christians is a pretty important book because it's the number one line of evidence or communication, if you like, the way that we can understand and know God and God in flesh, God made human, this person called Jesus. So it's a pretty important book, but the question is, can it be relied on? Why should we trust it? For me, at certain times in my journey, in terms of faith, that was a really, really important question, and I wasn't sure whether I could rely on it. After all, it was written by people I don't know, and it was written a long, long time ago. Why should I still trust it as speaking truth that matters to me in my life? And so I guess those kind of two questions were really important to find the answers to. Question number one, firstly, how do we know that when people wrote about Jesus, they were in a position to write truth instead of some fairy tale? And as I looked at the authors of the writings that dealt with this person, Jesus, what we find is that many of them were actually close mates of his. They could talk to him, they could see him in action, they could journey with him, and they did. And so they were eyewitnesses to the life of this remarkable person, to his life and his teachings and his death and his coming back to life again after. So they were in a position to know the truth. And we know that they wrote these things and sent them out to other Christians to be inspired by. And these writings were in circulation well within the lifetime of both friends and enemies of Jesus. And so they could have been discounted and they could have been rubbished and poo-pooed if they were wrong. So that was pretty important for me. The second issue was how do we know they've come through history to us accurately? I mean, after all, they had no photocopiers back then. They would have had to rewrite out another copy, and when that got a bit tattered, they'd have to write out another copy and write out another copy for great Art Gladys, who wants a copy as well. And we know from Chinese whispers, don't we, that mistakes can creep into a message. How do we know that it's come through history to us accurately? Well, the people who deal with these things, who are experts, they tell us that we don't have the originals of any of these writings from this time in history. We just don't. What we have, excuse me, a bunch of copies. And the more copies that we have that we can compare against each other, the more certain we can be about what the first document actually said. Now, as it turns out, there is enormous numbers of copies of the New Testament, which is the part of the Bible that speaks about the life of Jesus and his church. Ancient writings from this time in history, we have, by and large, very few copies. So Homer was a Greek writer, and he wrote this thing called the Iliad, and we have maybe 500 and something copies of the Iliad from this time in history. 500 copies. In terms of the writings of the New Testament, we have 5,500 copies. And if you add in translations into other languages and those kind of documents which have been paraphrased and so on, we have some 24,000 copies. So it works a bit like this, really. If you take a bit of paper, imagine this is the original document, and here are a whole bunch of copies of it. but this one's got damaged a little bit. This one got torn up by a cat. This one got burnt in a fire. We only have this much of it. What we are building, though, is a composite. And the more copies we have, the better we can understand what the original said. So, in terms of the writings about Jesus and the New Testament writings, we have enormous quantities of writings to compare. And experts tell us that we can be pretty sure to within about 0.5% of accuracy to what the original documents would have said. Okay. So for me, I was happy with the writers, knowing Jesus personally, and it coming through history to me accurately. Another really important thing was the fact that we know from things outside the Bible that these blokes who wrote these documents about Jesus, these biographies and the letters to his church, many of them died because they believed Jesus was someone special. Now, I know many people in the history of the world have died for things that are lies. I get that. But very few times, I would suspect, would someone die for a lie, realizing that it was a lie. Who would die for a lie knowing that it was a lie? These guys who wrote the biographies about Jesus died because they believed what was written was truth, and that Jesus was God in skin. If they had died for that knowing it was a lie, I just don't see that happening. So that was pretty important to me as well. One last comment about the Bible. We go to the Bible because it is such a wealth of information about Jesus. But did you know that even if we didn't go to the Bible, we would still have a kind of a skeleton of his life from sources outside the Bible, many of whom weren't even Christians. So we know from outside sources of the Bible, firstly, that Jesus existed. Secondly, that he was considered to be a wise man. Thirdly, that many people followed him. Fourthly, that some people thought he was the promised special Messiah of God. Fifthly, that he was condemned by a man called Pilate to die on a Roman execution device called a cross. And sixthly, that after his death, there continued to exist a group of people who were known as Christians, who believed he was remarkable. And that's all from sources outside the Bible. So if you take the Bible and those other things together, for me that was a pretty compelling argument for the fact that Jesus was both special, that he existed, and that he is someone who it's worth paying some attention to. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think. This is a free discussion, and if you want to post any comments, that would be cool. Until next time, take it easy. Bye for now.